guys, this is Nick, and welcome to the Endure with Nick podcast. I know you're probably wondering how do we get to podcasts and why is it called Endure with Nick? And I think, before we touch on what I've been through and how we got here, I want to read the definition of endure: remain in existence, to last, or suffer patiently. And everything good that we get normally we have to work towards it, and instead of getting something easy, it doesn't last that long. So for me, especially with what I've been through in life, I noticed most of the time, if it's something that I worked hard toward and received, I seem to appreciate it a lot more. um, most of you guys probably know me as a cop, and I appreciate the organic growth that we have on the social media page. We got over 200 followers in the little time that we have it already. And I'm hoping to reach out to more people along different walks of life, not just in law enforcement, but uh, just anybody that's been through anything and they're willing to talk about what happened to them. So for me, I'll take you back when I was 8 years old, living in Orlando with my family. Long story short, Jamaican household, a lot of people in the house. Next thing you know, there was a guy that ended up coming into our house and holding our family hostage. So the suspect, he came from down south Pompano Beach, robbed a convenience store, and ended up killing a convenience store clerk. Then he fled to Orange County. When he fled there, law enforcement, they found him, initiated a traffic stop on him. Ultimately, he ended up shooting a deputy in the leg, and then he fled to my aunt's house where we were staying at the time, my mom and my baby sister and I was 8 years old. And next thing you know, we're being held hostage. The hostage situation lasted 50 hours. And I can tell you that was the most excruciating, longest 50 hours in my life. It felt like each day kind of felt like a whole different lifetime. From the first time where the suspect ended up coming through the house, I saw him shoot my cousin, and grace of God, my cousin's alive. He's fine to this day. And after that, the suspect ended up herding everybody into one bedroom. And there's one of those things where you can remember like your major senses, your five senses. And for me, when the suspect ended up putting the gun to the back of my head while he was escorting us to a master bedroom closet, it was the coldest gun I ever felt to this day. Like I can't remember feeling the muzzle of the gun just touching the back of my head as if he had put it in a freezer for a week. And after, excuse me, after about halfway through the incident, law enforcement, they were outside. They wanted to bring us food. And the suspect, he ended up telling me to go get the food. Ironically, it was donuts. And I just remember telling my mom, told her go get the food because I was afraid. I was just a little kid at the time. And that was the last time I spoke to my mother. So when she went to go get the food from law enforcement, the SWAT sniper inadvertently shot her thinking she was a suspect. So moments after that, he ended up escorting me and my baby sister out of the house. And I just remember asking, where's my mom? And eventually, they told me what had happened. And then moments later, the suspect ended up taking his own life. So growing up, it didn't really make me want to get into law enforcement. I was just kind of aware of what law enforcement entails in regards to, like a hot situation like that. Uh, ended up living with my dad after my mom had passed away. And, kind of growing up with him and my stepmom, never really thought about being a cop. And as I started to get older, getting to high school, I was class clown, being the funny guy, lying about my grades, just barreling coasted my way through high school, and senior junior year, I'm actually going through adult ed just to graduate with a C average. While I'm in high school, well, actually, when I graduate high school, going to a local community college, end up finding out, my dad has been having an affair with my stepmom, and that young 18-year-old kid didn't really handle that the best way. Lost respect for my dad. Started doing the rebellious thing, smoking weed, having parties at the house whenever they were out of town, and eventually, got caught. Weed everywhere, house was trashed, and next thing you know, I'm homeless. Dad ends up kicking me out of the house. So now I'm living in my car for about a month, couch surfing at my friends' places while they're in college. And at this time, I had a girlfriend who's now my wife. She's been with me since day one. Her family ended up letting me stay with her and them. And there ends up being a big blowout argument between me and my dad. And then find out my dad's not actually my real dad. So in the midst of what happened to me when I was younger, traumatic situation that I can't control, and then me making these poor choices when I'm 18, I get thrown this whole new can of worms about finding out my dad's not even my real dad, and I've just been homeless for a short period of time. So I say all that just to say, you know, you're able to you can make the most out of whatever life gives you. If you want to be successful, you can choose to be successful, especially living in America. Or if you want to, woe is me, this is what happened to me, and I'm going to blame everybody else for my actions, and you can go that route. But for me, I was 18, 19, started working in construction. Then I realized doing that for a while in Florida, got tired of working in concrete, wanted to start making better choices, kind of live a more honest life, do the right thing, help people. And that's what brought me into wanting to get into law enforcement. And through law enforcement, I've been in it now, 10 years. I've met a lot of people along the way, coworkers or just people along the street that normally wouldn't talk to you if you'd walk up to them. But, wearing a uniform, people tend to open up to you more. And it's pretty amazing what you hear other people go through and how they get to where they're at today. Like if there's any time where I had the chance to talk to somebody, on scene or just like on a patrol trying to figure out like, hey, like, what do you do? Like, oh, I own this company. I'm like, oh, how'd you start up? Well, I went through this and that, or, I was homeless or I was a drug addict. And, now, especially like through the grace of God or just hard work and wanting to change, they people make better decisions and end up being successful. So I think in this day and age with technology, I felt like it was only a matter of time before I try to use some sort of resource to talk to people and reach out and try to connect with more people. So I find it, at least especially with my voice, I always hear people say I should be like a radio host, or they say I should be Barry White or something like that. I'm kind of old where I've heard of who Barry White is, but I couldn't name a song. But I feel like this is one of those things where I can reach out to people, especially across the world, just through a camera and kind of figure out like, hey, let's have a conversation. And maybe if our conversation can reach other people, it can help people get out of whatever they're going through. So for me, that's kind of what I envision doing with the podcast and like the social media page, especially throughout my law enforcement career. I've been able to be a part of like hostage negotiations team. And ironically, when I was taking the hostage negotiations course, one of the instructors was, going through slideshows of past hostage situations. And one of the news articles had a clip of my mom's obituary photo. And at that point, I, pointed out to the class, hey, that's that's actually my mom, and ended up doing like a brief speech on what happened. I feel like that's kind of what started helping put my foot in the door of guest speaking in that realm of kind of like motivational speaking or speaking to other like law enforcement agencies and classes and trainings. And I've tried to use I try to make your message, where I have spoken to kids, go to high schools, kind of talk to kids and say, hey, this incident happened that I couldn't control, and I still used it, turn it into a positive, and then another incident where I could control, where I made bad choices, hanging out with the wrong crowd, I still was able to get out of that hole and make something for myself. I got a beautiful wife, been together with 15 years, beautiful kids, I got a house, good job. Like I feel blessed to be able to do what I'm doing now. And, having kids and getting into fatherhood, I feel like that's also given me the motivation of like, hey, you can't just be you can't just be a dad and not lead by example. Like you have to show your kids that you can do hard things and you can overcome things. Especially my oldest, she's 9, and we've um we've put her in almost everything you can think of: horseback, swim, dance, volleyball, I mean piano, whatever, just to give her, show her like, hey, whatever you want to do, you can do it, and we believe in you. And I think growing up not having a stable household, it was being with my wife, we're able to kind of have the stability and give my kids something that we didn't have, just so they could try to reach their full potential. And it's funny, the other day where, 'cause, my wife's probably had tired of hearing me say all these motivational quotes and doing hard things. But my daughter told me the other day that they cleaned up the house when I picked her from school. And she said that she was able to do something fun after doing something hard. And I was like, oh, I like that. And I'm surprised. I was thinking to myself, I was like, wow, I'm surprised I couldn't think of that before. It took us a minute. I mean, if you're a parent, you already know how hard it is to parent, and then especially like co-parenting, being on the same level with your spouse, as in regards to like you know punishment, rewards, and all that kind of stuff. Especially when if you come from one background where you're used to getting beat. I mean, I had when I was younger, if I would talk smack or anything, like my mom was whooping my ass. So, and my wife, a little different background, so it's kind of more just trying to find that common ground of parenting. But I know, aside track from that, whenever a few years ago I started to get into running, and I found that to be a good outlet for me, especially just finding something, a hobby to do outside of law enforcement, and it kind of gives me that time to like try to go out, get some fresh air, like cleanse my mind, just try to do something hard. Originally, it started as a step challenge at work, where all the city employees were going to get given a free entry to a local half marathon race for like the top 10 in the step challenge for the month. And that first entry, I want to say about 8 years ago, I did my first half marathon, and I thought, wow, this was really hard, but I did it. I did a hard thing. And, all the medals, these big medals that they give you at the end, I would always, anytime I was done with the race, I'd bring it home, show my daughter, and say, hey, I did something hard, and she would like it. And sometimes she would keep them in her room, but then I started to hang them up in the garage because they would take up some of the space. And it continued to be a yearly thing of running half marathons. And I've been saying to myself the last few years, eventually I want to run a full marathon, and maybe start running further than that along. And this past year, I said, okay, well, let's do something hard. We know we can we know we can run a half, especially being more consistent when running. I know I could run that in a certain amount of time. And for me, I have a dad bod, so 255 pounds. Like I know my average running time is like 11 to 12 minute mile, but then if I'm running further than 10 miles, it's 12, 13 minute miles. So I was like, all right, let's try to work on our endurance and let's just sign up for the full. So this past year, signed up for the full marathon that we have locally out here. And I said, if I'm trying to do something that's new and hard, I got to start, doing more new hard things. So that entailed of me running during the summer, which is running in Florida heat's not fun, but um, at the end of the day, I completed my first marathon, and it definitely felt like a relief of like, hey, this was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I did it. I said I was going to do it, and I ended up doing it. And for me, some people can do things without like telling people about it. For me, I had to speak it into existence. I'm a big like speaker into existence kind of guy, where put it on Facebook, spend $100 on it, said, hey, we're running the full, and we did it. And it's funny when while I was doing it, there was I ran in a pace group with a bunch of old ladies, and towards the end, I'd say what mile 21, I felt like it was a run walk pace group, and towards the end, I was starting to like teeter off, where I knew I had to walk a little bit longer than I wanted. And this lady, probably about 80 something years old, she passes me, and it's like David Goggins would say, she took my soul. She passed me and she goes, it's not about your physical strength, it's about your mental strength. And she just like kept teetering along, and I was like, wow, like that's how it feels. And you know, eventually we got done. Got done. My legs were in a lot of pain. I got plantar fasciitis. My feet still hurt, but no one really cares what hurts. They just want to know if you did what you said you were going to do, and we did it. So for me, I try to weight lift and run. It's kind of my really my only hobbies now outside of work and being a dad. So it's really something I could go on talking about. And I know for my next hard thing that I'm going to be training to do, instead of worrying about um, signing up for something and then telling everybody about it, I feel like it's harder to just do it without speaking about it. So for me, I just want to be able to run a marathon, no race, just by myself, mentally kind of going through that, and just setting a goal for me and accomplishing it. And that's kind of where I'm at with like my mental health, you know, something to do outside of work as a hobby. I love I love doing that. I could keep going on and on about running. And for this like podcast, I want to talk to other people and kind of figure out like what do you do, or what have you been through, and like what do you do now? Like how'd you get over it? Like if you were work related, if you were in like a shooting, or if you were in some sort of traumatic incident, how did it affect your life? How'd you get over it? And like what are you doing now? Like how are you living your life now, and how'd you kind of went over all of that? So I think another thing for me is a quote, or not really, like a Japanese quote where they call it misogi, and that term's kind of the American like definition of it is misogi is you do something so hard one time a year that has an impact the other 364 days a year. So put something down on your calendar that scares you, and you never thought you could do, and then get it done. And one of those things for me was just even starting this podcast, and just kind of be open about speaking and talking about my family's incident. And for me, I feel like it's kind of helped in its own sort of way of therapy, just being able to talk about it and just reach others and try to help someone get out of whatever hole that they're in. If it's depression or thinking like, hey, I'm in the trenches right now, like this is hard. Like how do you get through what you're going through? And I mean, even for me currently, like fatherhood, 3 kids, 2 small kids, like it's I'd say it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's the greatest thing I've ever done to be able to come home and you know, have all my kids, see them all there, talk to them, hug them. One nuclear family, like that's it really. Most days, like during the work week, it's hard, but days off when you're enjoying your family, like, it's big, big for me. And but my next big thing that I'm going to be doing for my own personal calendar is signing up for my first ultra race, which is going to be in July out here. So, but I'm kind of starting small. 31 miles is what I'm shooting for. So, expect to hear me kind of talk about that, just to speak it into existence. Kind of helps give me that outside motivation of like, all right, I said I'm going to do this. We'll get it done, and go from there. So I figure I'd just do like a brief, episode 00 of the podcast. We'll start having guests on and, just kind of talk and reach out and try to help somebody if we can. So, and that's that. Hopefully we'll have a bunch of people on, and if not, we'll just have me talking on about what I'm going through. So thank you guys.